Just wanted to welcome everybody. This is the third session in our Turning Up the Heat webinar series. We did a session in February, another one in March. The links on the bottom are the recording for those sessions. And later this week, we'll be sending out an update to this session. Also, that would have the links for all three of the webinars if you'd like to either review ones that you've already seen or maybe catch up with ones that you weren't able to make on the other calls. But we appreciate you joining us again. For those that attended earlier sessions, this will kind of be that same type of format. I will start off by going over some information on the data center portfolio and Aruba Central cloud management. And then I'll turn it over to Jon Busshart, who runs our Business Transformation Center, who will provide a demo of the Aruba Central management platform and kind of how to manage switches and access points and those type of things. So I appreciate everybody joining. Kind of a review also is at Ingram, we have dozens of resources that are focused specifically on Aruba. So Brandon and I are technical resources. Kind of think of us as pre-sales engineers that can help you and your team. Jon runs the briefing center. He can help you do the demos. So the demo that you see, he can provide a demo for the Aruba Central stuff that's in today's session, but the demos he did in the previous sessions, he can also do them for the HPE server storage portfolios. So if you've got a customer that needs demo capabilities, we'd be happy to run those demos on your behalf. But we also have a ton of other specialists within Ingram to help you with your Aruba business. We have people that focus on renewing service contracts. We've got marketing specialists, lots of different capabilities to really make your life easier as you do business at Ingram with the Aruba portfolio. So since our last call, the Gartner Magic Quadrant for wired and wireless was released. And so this is a couple weeks old, but there's two big takeaways that I want to share with you today. The first and foremost one is Aruba's been in the leader quadrant for the 18th consecutive time. The second piece is that if you look at the other leader in the top right, you see Juniper. And earlier this year, HPE announced its intent to acquire Juniper Networks. It's already gone through a couple of the pieces necessary. So both boards approved it. Juniper's stockholders approved it. It's going through the regulation stuff that has to be done as part of an acquisition. But the expectation is a little bit later this year, Juniper will be part of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. And so think about the combination of Juniper and Aruba together, helping you to solve your customers' business problems. So you're getting two of the big powerhouse networking companies joining forces, and you're going to have the portfolios of each, sales teams, engineering teams, all those things combined together to really provide great solutions to meet your customers' business needs. So this slide is really to focus on a few things, because when HPE Enterprise looks at the data center, this is their edge to cloud architecture. And within this architecture, you see the orange piece, which is really the networking pieces that I'm going to speak with you today. But as part of the architecture, it has all the server compute platforms that you're familiar with. It can run any of the different workloads that your customers are looking for. There's great AI and analytical capabilities. Of course, it's a security framework that's part of this. And customers need a number of other things in addition to the great technology. They need things like financial services. They need things like foundation care, next business day support, a bunch of those things that HPE provides. And then what I think is a pretty critical piece to this is the GreenLake cloud management platform. So when Jon gets into the demo, he'll kind of show you the main GreenLake launch points. But really what's unique in this situation is that HPE allows customers, or allows you, if you want to be an MSP, to go into one cloud portal and manage all of the products within the data center. So you can manage the networking products, you can manage the server products, the storage products, all that type of stuff through the GreenLake portal. And this really makes life easy because today most customers are going into one portal to manage networking, a different tool to manage compute, and a different tool to manage storage. So this is really simplifying that management experience. So within the data center solutions that we're going to talk about today, there is a whole series of switches, and I'll show you what the switches look like and kind of where they fit within the data center. There are some different series. What we're typically seeing today is there's still a good amount of 10 gig top of rack switches that are out there, but 25 gig is becoming the predominant connection of choice. But as we continue to do bigger workloads, especially things like AI, we're really going to need much faster connections. So think of 40 gig, 100 gig, 400 gig type connections to be able to handle the workloads from these new applications. Part of the data center solution is you have to have management tools to be able to manage this. And that's where Jon's really going to focus on the Aruba Central management piece of it. And like I mentioned, as part of HPE, this is part of their solutions. So let's take a look at a couple of their solutions. So if you go on the HPE partner portal, or if you go on Seismic to download presentation type of things, HPE has produced a number of reference architectures based on all the major applications that you guys are selling, whether it's VMware or Microsoft or Red Hat or Oracle or SAP HANA, any of those applications. They have taken all the gear, put it into HP Labs, taken a look at that application and seeing what kind of resources that particular application needs, and they built a best practice reference architecture. Here are the number of storage devices that are needed and which ones. Here are the number of server devices that are needed and which ones. Here are the Aruba networking products that are needed and how many of those devices. And here's how you interconnect them together for best practice. Here's how you do it for redundancy, all of those type of things. So what's important about this is that you can sell your customers reference architectures that HPE recommends that are performance oriented towards those particular applications that your customers need. So if your customer wants to do a Microsoft SQL Server, you can go up on the partner portal and put that information in there, and you can see a reference architecture of what's the best way to run that application. And Aruba is part of those solutions. The other kind of piece that complements this is when you do a total HPE solution, all of those other pieces within the solution also get validated and tested. So there are things like transceivers and direct attach cables and other pieces that are part of this solution that HPE has validated will work together. So when you sell your customer one of these type of solutions with HPE servers, HPE storage, and Aruba networking products, HPE's already tested it in the labs. Everything interoperates. They've added any patches or things that are necessary for those things to interoperate correctly together. And so this is a known solution, right? This isn't something where the customer has to get one part from this vendor and another part from another vendor and another part from another vendor and hope these things work together. And if something doesn't work, worry about how it gets supported. So these are all supported within HPE. And if there's any issues, call HPE support to get it resolved. Now I mentioned that there's a number of different switches, and the switch series are mostly focused on the workloads. So if we start at the bottom left, the common workloads that are out there, your typical Microsoft, VMware, Red Hat type of enterprise workloads, what we're typically seeing is that those workloads are using primarily 10 gig top of rack switches, but also 25 gig. And so things like the 8300 series are perfect for those particular top of rack applications. Same with storage. When we look at Nimble, Nutanix, and Electra, those have been 10 gig. They're kind of moving to 25 gig. And so the 8300s are typically optimized for that type of solution. We've got a really cool product called the CX10K that is unique in the industry where it does distributed services, which is a great solution for companies that have security sensitive data. It could be HIPAA compliance, it could be PCI, and they really need security going between top of rack data center traffic. And I'll talk to you about that in the next few slides. And then for customers that are looking at really doing high performance computing, where you need more than that 10 gig, 25 gig connectivity, things like the Cray systems or the Superdome systems, Aruba's got a 9300 solution that we can do 100 gig top of rack connections to those devices and then connect them into something like the 9300 at the top, which I can do 400 gig connections, 100 gig connections to some of these 8000 series, 10,000 series, 9000 series. So a few slides back, I kind of showed you the architecture associated with HPE and their edge to cloud solutions. This is the one that's really focused on networking. So if we take that same type of architecture, if you will, the data networking products are really down in that infrastructure piece at the bottom that's really in that connect piece of it. We've got security that's part of this portfolio. We also have security products that complement it if we need more security. We've got a lot of automation. So I can do things like zero touch provisioning. I can do AI type things. I can do analytics and print out reports. And this can once again span from a remote office, a branch office, cloud, campus data center across all different types of connectivity. And all of these can be managed by Aruba Central, which Jon is going to share with you as part of that demo. And the piece on the right, the GreenLake service, I'm going to talk to you about that at the end of the presentation because this is really a unique thing that Aruba can do that the other competitors can't. So the platform itself, the Aruba CX platform, is a series of switches that were redesigned to really be based on this cloud native switching architecture. So it's a new way of doing software delivery where things are more containerized. So the software code that needs to run is what needs to run. It makes it a whole lot easier to add new features. If a certain feature has an issue, it can be isolated within that container. And so there's a lot of enhancements that we can do because of this cloud native switching architecture. We can also get a lot more analytical data. And we'll see some of that stuff as Jon does the demo for Aruba Central. And then this distributed architecture with the 10K is really something that's unique in the data center space. And we'll talk about that for a few slides. So here's the Aruba CX switching portfolio family slide. The ones we're really going to focus on today are the ones on the top right, which kind of have that purple data center arrow on them. The 8000 series, the 9000 series, the 10,000 series. But what I want you to look at and understand within this portfolio is the CX switching portfolio does all the stuff in the data center that we're discussing today, but there's also an entire series of switching products, the 6000 series, that are optimized for the campus. So these products are going to have more of your traditional RJ45 ports that support power over Ethernet, whether it's 30 watt support, 60 watt support, 90 watt support. We're going to have 1 gig connection as the common one people are buying today, but there's also multi-gig connections like 2.5 gig and 5 gig. Most of these are going to have 10 gig, maybe 40 gig uplinks, but those are more campus focused. When we get to the 9Ks and 10Ks and 8Ks from the data center portfolio, now you're looking at more data center products. Everything's redundant power supplies, redundant fans. We have the fans that are positioned either front to back or back to front, depending upon the cooling in the data center. Some data center feature sets that are part of those. But collectively, the CX switching portfolio enables customers to standardize on one platform from a small branch office all the way up to the data center. So let me show you why that's important. Most of the competitors in this space, they have different architectures for each one of the different models. So for example, they typically do cloud-based networking at their branch locations. The cloud-based networking products that they have are based on a networking hardware and an OS that runs on it and a networking management tool in the cloud that's associated only with those devices. If you want to buy their data center platforms, well, that's a whole different architecture for the switching. It's a totally different OS, networking OS that runs on the switches, and a different management tool that manages the data center. And then if you want to get their campus solutions, once again, it's a different hardware architecture, a different OS that runs on it, and a different management tool. And so customers now have to learn different CLI commands. They've got to buy multiple management tools. They've got to train their team on how to manage each one of them in a different way. So they got to send them to certification classes and all of those different things. And then on top of it, there's lots of software licensing and other things that really make that solution complex. With the CX switching that I just showed you in the previous slide, I can take one of those 12-port switches, put it at a branch. I can stack some 6000 series at the edge of the campus. I could put a couple of big chassis at the campus core. I could put my 8000, 9000, 10,000 data center switches in the data center. They all run the same Aruba CX operating system, so there's only one command line. I can cloud manage any CX switch. So if I want to do cloud management, I just add a subscription to it, and now I can cloud manage it. And so Aruba is really making the experience for the customer a lot easier. And if you're acting as an MSP, this is a whole lot easier for you also, because your networking team that are going to be managing your customers' networks, they just have to learn CX. And if you need to do cloud management, you just add the cloud license to it, and now you can cloud enable it. So it's a much easier architecture that customers love. So the next few slides, I'm going to kind of share with you a really cool product that Aruba has that if you really want to go into your customers and offer a differentiated solution, this is it. So your customers today have this centralized services architecture. So what the image is attempting to show you is we got 5 racks of gear. A, B, C, and D are going to be your typical server storage workloads. And then your end of row solution over there in E has all the services that are in the data center. So all your security devices, things like firewalls and that type of stuff, your server load balancers, all of those type of things are typically in the end of row. And if traffic needs to go from, let's say, a server in rack A to another server in rack A, that data then has to go to the top of rack switch where it says leaf on the far left. And then that leaf then has to forward it over to one of the spines. The spine sends it over to rack E. Rack E sends it over to the appropriate application. Maybe it does load balancing, maybe it does firewall. It could be doing a number of different services. And then once all that gets done, that application then sends it to the top of rack switch in rack E, that then sends it to the spine, that then sends it to rack A again, that sends it over to the server that it needs to go to. And so we're hairpinning all this traffic, and we're adding a lot of latency, a lot of bandwidth on all of these links in order to provide these services. So Aruba partnered with AMD to create a distributed services architecture. So think of those services that I just showed you in rack E, the end of row rack. Think of those services now running in the top of rack switch. So if I've got data that needs to go from a server in rack A to another server in rack A, the data goes to the top of rack switch. The top of rack switch has the ability to do all of those things, to do load balancing and firewall and those type of things. And so the traffic just stays on that local switch and gets forwarded back down to the server it needs to go to. It never needs to go across that spine leaf architecture and get hairpinned to and from different resources. And so that's really this Aruba CX10K switch. It's an Aruba top of rack switch, and it has dedicated hardware to perform these services. Things like firewall services, things like server load balancing that we talked about, distributed denial of service, make sure that that doesn't happen and take down the data center, encrypt traffic, doing things like HTTPS as an example. And if you've got something like a university where maybe they have different grants and different agencies that are using this infrastructure, we can do microsegmentation and use things like network address translation or NAT to keep them separate. And we can do all this stuff in hardware. So we're getting 800 gigs of firewall performance in each one of these top of rack switches, just to kind of give you a basic understanding of this. So this is really a brand new network architectural design for the data center that if you're looking to lead with a solution that the other vendors aren't leading with because they don't have this infrastructure, the CX10K is really a revolutionary product that's going to totally change the way that we design data centers. So I'm going to switch a little bit now and talk more about the management piece of it, because the other part of this webinar is associated with Aruba Central. And Aruba Central is really that cloud management platform that allows you to either manage your customers' networks, kind of like an MSP mode, or for your customers to manage their own networks using the cloud portal. Now, a couple of things that are unique about this is, number one, most of your customers are just going to buy a software subscription and use the service that Aruba provides. But you may have customers that would like this same type of service, but be on a physical service at their location. So they want it on-prem. So the Aruba Central can be on-prem for those customers. Maybe they have security requirements that prevent them from doing this cloud-based application. So we can do it on-prem, which is pretty unique for this cloud management platform. Within this platform, Jon will show you that we can manage access points, we can manage switches, there's SD-WAN gateways we can monitor in there. He'll show you some of the AI capabilities that are part of it. We can do CLI pieces from Aruba Central. We can also do things like net edit, and I think he's going to show you a little bit of that. And there's also an additional tool that Aruba has called Aruba Fabric Composer that is focused on automating the data center. And it's got great API integration with a lot of the data center vendors where we can connect with them through the APIs and do orchestration, get real-time telemetry and some other different things. But the Fabric Composer gives us the ability to go into it and pull up our switches. We can actually build a network using the Fabric Composer before we even have the hardware. So I could take some 9300s at the core and connect them to 8360s. I can do the connections between them. I can build out the routing policies or whatever I need to. I can run a test to make sure everything's connected and configured correctly. And then when I get ready to do my rollout, I can push those configs to it so that I can get the units up and running ahead of time. And so there's some great tools and management pieces that are part of Aruba Fabric Composer that a lot of our data center customers add. And so the last couple of pieces I want to talk to you about here is really associated with GreenLake. So if you've been on HPE presentations, you know that GreenLake is a description that talks about all of their platforms that are associated with as a service. So with Aruba Central, if you buy the software subscription and act as an MSP, or if your customer buys the software subscription and manages it themselves, that's really software as a service. So Aruba hosts it, and the customer pays that software subscription in order to use that particular service. I mentioned that we could also do the on-prem. So if you want to do on-prem, we can definitely do that and put a server out there and do Aruba Central on-prem. If you want to act as an MSP, you can do this in one of two ways. Like I mentioned, the customer can buy the subscriptions and they could pay you as an MSP, give you access to their account so that your team can manage the network. Or if you want, and you have those MSP offerings, you can buy the software subscriptions, add the cost for your managed services, and bill that to your customer as one bill that includes that subscription service plus your managed service cost. And the other piece associated with this is there is a GreenLake for Aruba piece. And so if customers want HPE Aruba to manage their network, there is an offering to do that. So companies like Home Depot actually purchased this solution, and HPE Aruba manages all of their infrastructure for them. And there's one more GreenLake piece I want to share with you that's kind of unique in the industry, and it's these Aruba service packs. And so your customers have typically purchased networking as a CapEx. You've typically also sold your customers your server storage either as CapEx or you've sold it to them as a service pack, right? So maybe with Microsoft or Amazon or one of those other platforms that you might be selling, there is a monthly cost associated with that, and you guys can acquire that, pass it through, and bill it to the customer so much per month. HPE offers this GreenLake for Aruba service packs where you can do it on all of their networking gear. So you can buy those data center top of rack switches. You could also buy the server storage, and the customer can buy it, and it can be put on an as a service pack type of thing where you as a partner buy it from Ingram for say so much a month. Let's say it's $10,000 a month for those products. You get that, you do your markup. Maybe you do 10% markup, so that 10,000 is now 11,000. You sell it to your customer for 11,000 per month, and they buy that service, that network as a service. So instead of making a CapEx purchase, they're going to buy that as a service pack. So they're going to pay, say, 10K a month as opposed to hundreds of thousands of dollars for a CapEx type purchase. And it's one of those things where Aruba owns the products and everything associated with it. So you as a business partner, you don't have to bring in those products and purchase them yourself and be on the hook if for some reason the customer cancels that particular application. So lots of great ways to look at the data center. There's definitely different ways to acquire the services, whether it's software as a service, a CapEx type purchase, whether it's these service packs. The other thing is that Aruba's really focused on data center solutions for this year. So they've got a great program right now until October 31st, where they're providing up to $5,000 per switch, an additional $1,000 for GBICs or transceivers. If you guys are going to go sell an Aruba data center solution, an 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 type solution to your customers, and replace Cisco, Juniper, Arista. And so there's a program for it. When we send out the deck, we'll include that link to gives you all the T's and C's about the program. But what I want you to understand is that Aruba is really focused on the data center this year. This is just another piece that Aruba is doing to help you win these data center networking opportunities, right? So if you can get a $5,000 trade-in for all of their old data center products per unit, that'll help you from a pricing perspective to compete for that opportunity and help to tear out the Cisco, Juniper, and Arista and replace it with the Aruba platform. So why HPE Aruba for switching? Maybe the biggest feature I'll tell you on this is HPE Networking has been doing switches for decades. If you've been in the marketplace for a while, you're familiar with the ProCurve switches, the Aruba switches. There's been over 1 billion switch ports that we've sold. So this is a industry standard solution. Aruba's #2 in the marketplace. 18 years in a row, Magic Quadrant for wired and wireless, right? Lots of great patents. And Aruba's got customers in all the different verticals that you sell into. So if you need a reference customer, we can connect you with the Aruba team and get you a reference customer associated with it. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Jon.
All right, I'll just confirm with you, Jeff, that you can see my desktop.
Yes.
Okay, so like Jeff mentioned earlier, what I show you certainly is available for others within your team as well as your end users in your environment. I do work out of the Business Transformation Center, and as I've mentioned across this webinar series, you know, I support HPE across stack, so server, storage, networking, as well as GreenLake technologies. So if you need me to, you know, show these stuff to your customers or to your end users, I'm available. I have equipment. However, we could leverage that to help you guys be successful. I'm here to help you. So I'm going to talk about Aruba Central, but obviously I want to talk one level higher since we're talking about an overall strategy and competitive advantage type of solutions, and certainly GreenLake does represent that. And I know a lot of us have run into GreenLake if you've been dealing with HP for a while. We've run into it as kind of the cost model. Right, pay for what you utilize on a monthly basis. I usually like to compare like storage. So if your customer gets 10 terabytes of storage on site, but they only use 7, they only pay for 7 on a monthly basis. That's a very cloud-like approach to be able to manage on-prem hardware. But what I like to say, and that's usually people's first exposure to GreenLake, but what I like to say is GreenLake, if we look at the cloud as being more of an experience and less of a destination, really GreenLake brings that experience to on-prem hardware. All right, and certainly we're going to dig into Aruba Central, and that's for managing on-prem access points, switches, gateways, all things networking from HPE and Aruba. All right, Compute Ops allows us to manage on-prem HPE ProLiant servers. All right, and this is getting to be a pretty advanced solution. Firmware updates, operating installs, configure RAID setup, all from the cloud without being local on-prem, again, through these safe and secure tunnels. And finally, well, not finally, but data services or data services cloud consoles. Maybe some of you heard that's everything HPE storage related. So Electra arrays, backup strategies, disaster recovery, that can all be done with them. And certainly InfoSight AI in the cloud. There's these new pieces which are kind of showing up. For example, the Sustainability Insights Center is just released a little while ago, and that gives you view into what your energy costs are inside your environment. And that's kind of interesting. I know that's not for everybody, but it's handy information to have. Also, if you think about it, you know, you can deploy this, or you have your customers leverage this, and this is a cross-stack solution, meaning that like Jeff had mentioned, a lot of other vendors may have cloud management of individual pieces in this environment, but HPE manages everything in a stack. For example, if you're deploying maybe a VMware cluster in a customer's environment, could you come in and configure the switches with Aruba Central? Certainly. Could you then go and deploy the ESX host with Compute Ops and update the firmware and do that? Lifecycle manage it? Absolutely. Could you carve out the storage? Absolutely. Could you do that all while maintaining costs, paying for what you utilize on a monthly basis? Absolutely. And it's not an all or nothing situation. Your customer can pick and choose what they want, just like any cloud service that's kind of out there. All right. And that's kind of the concept. And another thing is we're going to see more integration between these different solutions together. For example, right, Compute Ops, here we are on a networking webinar, but if I launch Compute Ops real quick and I go over to manage, you'll scroll down and we'll see Aruba Central integration. So now I'll be able to get metrics from the client server and populate that into Aruba Central, and then Aruba Central populating that back into Compute Ops. Right? And if you bought a CTO server from HPE, they're offering now either Compute Ops or OneView management as a part of that solution. All right, so let's kind of break down into really what we're here for. Let's go into Aruba Central. So I'll dig into this. I'm going to try to do this from a high level. Obviously, we can get together and I can go, very detailed on these things in there. I'll show you some bits and pieces that exist. One of the things I like to point out to people as we navigate through this is you always want to pay attention to what's up here. Right now, we're looking at information globally. Right, so reporting globally, but based on what we have selected over here, they can be groups, they can be sites, which is literally just that, is sites. Groups are more of a maybe configuration and reporting context. Labels can be anything you want, however you want to organize, but these are just different reporting contexts. But based on what I have selected up here, right, that will give me different options below here, and based on what I have selected over here, my tabs will change across the top. Right, so I usually like to kind of let people understand you want to look at what's up here. This can also not only be these entities, it can also be individual switches or access points. It can also be client as well. So clients as well inside this environment. All right. Now this interface is easy to use. You can click around and get information. You can see I got 2 healthy sites here. Right. I can actually dig into the floor plan of this site. Right. And this is actually back at Ingram Micro in Williamsville. And I can open that up and I can get a nice heat map. Right. And it doesn't look like there's a lot of people in the office. These are a couple clients that I have that are connecting into our environment. All right, and I can click on them. So that's kind of handy. I could also get the typology. Now I reconfigure my racks all the time, so this isn't necessarily the best looking typology, I think, but it's a great way to kind of get an understanding of how things are interconnected and their relationship within the environment, right? And again, if you notice over here, we're at a site level. We're no longer at a global level, right? But I quickly got into that information by just looking at this network health summary and selecting one of these and digging in. Right. We could also look at a summary of wireless traffic that's happening in our environment. We can see the clients, the usage, client count per network, right? Bandwidth usage per network, and I could select individual wireless networks if I felt like it. All right, we can see top clients over here. So for example, maybe I'm going to grab this guy right here. I know he happens to be doing some interesting things. Now, if you notice, this over here has changed to be that client, and also what my options have changed below. But we get a lot of information about this client. I could see where this client is connected to this SSID, this wireless network, right? And then that traffic's flowing through this access point, and then going through this switch over here, right? And that's actually the port on the switch. Right now, this is an Aruba UXI sensor, so it connects and disconnects from the network. If you want to learn more about that, I'd be happy to tell you about that. As a matter of fact, if you're having issues on customer networks and finding it hard to troubleshoot that, it's a great option for that. But we can see this client is disconnecting and reconnecting, and we can see that visually in this environment. We could also look at its location, right, on the floor map. All right, so this is all handy information when it comes to this client. All right, maybe we want to look at application information on this client. So I'm certainly can get that, and we're loading that over here. Facebook, why are they wasting my time on my network looking at Facebook when they should be doing work? Right, I could see that. Now maybe I'm interested in how Facebook is being utilized globally inside the environment. So I could click back, still under the clients, but I still have that application context listed here. All right, and I could list all the applications everybody's using in this environment. So I don't see Facebook pop up. So I can search that though. And go Facebook, there it is. And I could see how it's being utilized overall within my network. All right, so a lot of great information. And again, we quickly picked something that was of interest to us, and we dug into that. And we found out more about what was happening within our network. All right, so again, I'm going to go back to we're still in the global context. I'm going to go back up to overview. All right, and again, we're only on our second tab here, Wi-Fi summary here, and we've gotten a lot of information about what's happening in our network. I could also go to Wi-Fi connectivity in here and get other interesting information in our environment, especially here. So AI Insights is a way of connecting the dots between different resources within Aruba Central to give you a better understanding of what's happening on your network. Right, so here, clients had a significant number of DHCP connection problems. Right, and this will be context aware. It'll be related to what I'm looking at. If I go over to AI Insights, I get the overall view of issues that have been happening, for this time frame that I have over here, and I could certainly stretch that out if I wanted to. So, for example, here's our clients had a significant number of DHCP server problems. We could expand that out, and we could see when that happened. We could see the client that was affected. Right, we could see the access point that they went through. Right, as well as the server and the site that they're on. So again, we get a lot of great information. Again, just at a few clicks, something of interest, we could dig in and understand what's going on to a greater degree. Some other things you could do from a global context. Certainly, there are alerts and events inside this environment that we could look at. They are definitely configurable alerts and events. All right, so you could send these out to certain participants. All right, we could pick what type of reports are sent out. Right, since we're talking a lot about switches, these are different types of switching reports. Right, let's see, I have PoE enabled. Let's see, why don't we do switch hardware failure? We can enable that if we wanted to. It's just a matter. Some of these have additional configuration options for them. If you click on them, it'll ask you, what groups you want, who do you want to send the information to, and things like that. There's also an audit trail over here, so you can tell who's done what inside this environment. There's a set of tools here, so you can actually, from this kind, there's better ways to probably do this, but you could certainly get to a console of a switch if you wanted to. And I could do something like this. We'll do switch. We'll select our new CX switch. Do admin. Log in. And then we get connected. And then we could do things like a lot of people like to do a show run. Right, so you can see their switch configuration as it exists locally if you needed to do that. Right, there's also a series of reports that can be created inside this environment. Right, now you can browse and manage them. You can have them sent to you. You can create them in a PDF document, a spreadsheet if you wanted to. I don't have anything created, but what I like to usually do is show people each one of these reports has a preview, so you understand what type of report that you're creating and what type of information you're going to gather. So like switch planning capacity. Right. We were looking at AppRF, which is the applications that were being utilized. Right, so we can get that type of report. Right. Let's see, PCI compliance. People seem to be interested in that. Let's see, fails. Right, so a lot of things. You can also centrally manage firmware revisions. So that's something that a lot of people are interested in, is keeping consistent firmware revisions or making firmware updates a lot easier. Certainly, the attack footprint that exists out there is if you don't stay up to date with your firmware in your environment. But we have different options. Since we're talking about switches, I'll go over to switches. And we'll select that now. These switches will show up there. They are. So we could go over here and we could set compliance if we wanted to. All right, we could do it for all groups. We could choose individual groups, and then we could choose the AOS, and this would be the ProVision, ProCurve legacy type of switches that are out there that a lot of our customers are utilizing and love. Right, you can select the version that you want there. Right, over here is the CX version. Right, and then you could set compliancy based on that, but you're not limited to those type of things as well. You could also upgrade all from this context. Again, you could pick and choose. If I wanted to upgrade individual switches, I could do that over here as well. Okay. Again, since we're talking about switches, I'd like to dig in a little bit on a switch and show you some configuration context on a switch. I don't want to go too far into the weeds. I just want you to understand some things. We're actually looking at our CX switch in our environment. So let me grab that switch over here. Right, and we're going to go over to the devices, and then I'm going to go over to config. All right, and this is the config context for this switch. We could do some basic things that people would certainly want to create a VLAN. All right, so if I did VLAN 181, I'm going to go quickly here. And we could add that. Right. See that down there, and then looks like I typed it wrong. Oh well. We could go back, and then I could go to interfaces, and then I could assign that to an interface. For example, maybe I want to do this guy here. I'll edit this guy. Maybe we'll make this guy a trunk for some reason. We'll make the native VLAN at 181, and then we'll allow some VLANs. You could certainly do like 80 to 87, or I find it easier to do all the VLANs, so we could save that. All right, so I guess my point here is you could certainly go through a GUI and configure this switch. But one of the things that I like, and I think is an advantage to this, because you'll often run into people who are definitely people who manage switches. They like to see the GUI, excuse me, they like to see the command line, I should say, in the environment. And we could certainly manage through a GUI, but maybe they want to do something a little bit more programmatic through an interface. So we have multi-edit up here. All right, so if I enable multi-edit. Right now, the idea with configuration is you configure at the group. Now, I know I only have one switch in here, but you could picture, a whole variety of switches, and they would all have the same exact configuration. But what if I needed to change an individual switch? And I'm going to turn off multi-edit. We'll come back to that. But if I needed to change an individual switch, I could certainly do that by selecting list. All right, selecting the switch, and notice this up here changes. All right, and then I could go back over to a config context and configure this switch, and this will come up in a second and do what I was doing before, but add a switch level. So I have that ability. But if I wanted to do multiple switches, like I was just on a conference call with a customer who had switches all across the United States, and they wanted to set time zones on a certain set of switches. Well, you could do that easily with multi-edit. So I'm going to go back into that. All right, we're going to enable multi-edit. But again, managing maybe more at a command line level, people do like that. I'm going to select the switch, and I'm going to edit. And I can select multiple switches if I wanted to. So I'm going to select edit config. All right, and I can actually go into this config, and I can add extra VLANs to this if I wanted to. All right, so if I wanted to add something like 182, oops, that won't go. 182. All right, hit enter. All right, and then click save. That configuration would get pushed out inside this environment. All right, and then again, it would only the switches I had selected on there. So it kind of gives users the best of both worlds. If they want to manage more from a config file based or more from the GUI, they can work in one, see the results in the other. They can move back and forth. And I think that's a handy option, and it makes a lot of people who are moving to these cloud platforms a little bit more comfortable with what they're working with in the environment. Right. Right. And we got into a lot of that very quickly by just clicking around. But again, keep in mind that this is one component of the entire GreenLake platform. We're just dealing with switches, access points, gateways. GreenLake really and Aruba Central is really meant to be a whole and complete management interface for your customer's entire environment. And again, this is one of the competitive advantages of this, not only being able to manage the networking, being able to manage the compute, as well as the storage through one cloud-based platform. If the pandemic, I hate to keep on bringing that up, but if that's taught us anything, right, remote management and managing devices, through the cloud makes a lot of sense, right? Even our day-to-day work today, right? None of us want to go back into the office. We'd rather work remote. This certainly enables a lot of those things. So I think I'll hand this back to Jeff, or does Brandon want this?
I will take it from here. Thanks for the demo, Jon. Definitely appreciate it. For those that attended the webinars, we definitely appreciate your attendance. Hopefully you learned a lot about the Aruba platforms and the architectures, and I hope you enjoyed the demos that Jon put together.